Well, welcome to another edition of System Override. How are you doing today, Bri?
Good. I'm just trying to bring my blinks back because I know I have to hold really still at the beginning. It's like, can I blink again? Am I ready to, can I be animated again?
Did I tell you though it did work yet last
Did
week?
it? Oh, good.
Yeah. For all our listeners, that always catches us like with our eyes closed, and so we're like now staring at it, trying to not get our eyes to close. But yeah, it did work and got better shots, anyways. Yeah. How was your week?
It is good. I feel like it flew by. I felt like Tuesday felt like Friday. And now that I'm at Friday, I'm like, how is it Friday? And so it was a busy week and it felt like there was a lot going on. Um, and also too, just interesting for me because I feel like I've had to really shift my mindset of like, when you're like, you move into leadership roles and your work just looks different than it used to. And so I still though like I've realized how much I anchor on the sense of like tangible versus leading, directing, like the more soft leadership skills or conversations or this or that. It just doesn't hit the same way for me in terms of feeling like, that same level of like, oh, I got so much done. Because like when you have
Right.
something tangible to like show in front of you, you're like, look at all of the things and the work that I did. But when
Right.
a lot of your work now turns into something different and it's enabling very big outcomes, but it doesn't necessarily have those same tangible proof points yet.
Yeah.
I just have to continually still remind myself of like, because I'm like, did I do enough? Was enough done? I don't know. Do I need to do more? And I'm trying to really change that inner voice for myself.
That's great.
It's
Well,
hard.
and don't you think that gets exaggerated in a tech company where,
Yes.
like, on the task side of the
Yes.
business, it's like rapid fire, right? Like, when there's a problem to be solved, we're moving at lightning speed. But when we're building strategies, when we're getting feedback on new products, when we're making and building relationships, those are like a very much a drip kind of process
Yeah,
which takes much longer, although every probably has, like you said, just has bigger impact when
it does.
when all the work comes together, but it doesn't feel the same energy as
It
all those
doesn't feel the
tasks you
same.
can get done.
And I think, like, maybe if you're not in tech and you're doing that because the rest of the organization is moving at a similar pace, but, like, I think when you're in
Yeah,
the just to like, you're also
totally
like, you
agree.
have the company, like, actively driving towards a lot of very, like, technical things and doing that, and then you have a lot of strategic stuff, and from a leadership perspective as far as direction and ensuring, like, we're having the thing and finding opportunities and research sometimes, or even just, like, building pipeline or funnel, and, like, that is all vitally important to the company, but it does hit different, and you don't I think it's like you don't get the dopamine hit right away, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? And so, like, with that
and we all know that's why we're in tech. It's all
yeah.
about the dopamine.
Oh, yeah, we are dopamine chasers. That's why we're all ADHD. It's like, "Yes, this makes me feel so good."
Because why else would anybody do this? It has to be the
We get
dopamine.
something out of it. Might be toxic, but we do.
Oh, man, we're gonna have fun today. Okay, let's switch over to the big ask from last week, which was about like writing down or getting clarification on something that your company's done that isn't written down. And so, like, obviously, you and I are responsible for making sure it's written down. So it's hard for us to action that. But let's remind the audience, like, why that is important for leaders to think about when they are kind of putting stuff into the culture and into the communication paths for people.
Absolutely, and I think, like, you can look at this in a lighter, more how you enable perspective, and then also from a legality perspective when you're looking at leadership and, like, running certain things. So depending
Yeah.
on your situation, there's different sides of that spectrum. I think, one, putting things in writing from a enablement and a team alignment perspective is so important as an anchor point. You think of how and, like, also so much that gets lost in verbal communication due to assumption. And so I think that's the one thing is there's a lot of language that we use that means different things to different people. And so even though we're saying the same words, we might actually be interpreting the meaning of those
Exactly.
statements in a different way. And that is where I personally always see the breakdowns in
Yeah.
communication is everyone's like, yeah, we're saying the same thing. And then you lean into it a little more and they're like, oh shit, that's what you meant. that's not what I meant. And so I think just that alignment as far as like, this is the contract we're agreeing to as far as engagement is concerned, or this is the plan that we're saying. And I think the action of putting in writing, one, forces you to think about that and really framework it in a way. Because sometimes when you're just giving concepts to execution, there is a gap of what needs to happen in between. And so sometimes like you're sitting up here, but you haven't given enough to execute effectively. It's like if you're too high level and you leave a lot out, and depending on what type of resources you have and what kind of skills they have, like that might be like that gap might be too great to actually realize your outcomes. Or even just from an alignment perspective, as far as intentionality and making sure you're not reworking and everyone's on the same page, that's a place to refer back to. That's a place when we get so busy and forget, you come out of your Friday or your weekend being like, okay, God, what did we talk about on Thursday? I got to go back to that. So I think that is very important. And then I think on the legality perspective, if you're in a leadership role, if you're running a business, if this is like individuals or clients, it's so important to be explicit and have something to fall back on when depending on how those things turn out. Like you don't know what's going to happen, and a lot of like I think we certainly have a badge of like weathering a lot of adversity through the time of league. And so like I personally feel like I've gotten, as someone who doesn't like to be too prescriptive about those things, because I feel like sometimes it can make relationships weird, and I'm just so much more of a relationship based like person and how I work, that I have learned some really hard lessons on in terms of like really being explicit and not making assumptions on. I think it's just you don't know how things are going to roll out when people are put in, or relationships or partnerships or whatever are put into a space where, the unexpected or not according to plan happens. And it's been kind of shitty. I'm not going to lie. It's a little,
Yeah.
my little Pollyanna eyes are a little bit not so wide anymore, Shannon. They're a little, concerning now.
And I thought back to it too. In today's world of this, people float in and out of work throughout a day or a week. And so they're very much used to looking at stuff maybe asynchronously, following it, hearing a communication and then following up. And some people really need to be reading stuff. So when leadership chooses not to write stuff explicitly down for their workers or give just high level, strategical thoughts without kind of crafting them with the why, it really disadvantages their employees, where when they want to go and really ingest it and think about it, and it actually probably, like, not probably, it definitely reduces the ability of your employees to act on their own to achieve the goals you want them to.
Hmm.
It's kinda like putting their hands behind their back when, and I think last week it was really in relationship to how AI is used in the company, where what they're thinking about it for, how do they want their frontline or, junior employees to be really bringing it up grassroots because they use it more maybe frequently than their
Hmm.
executive teams, or thinking about that. If you don't write it down, how do they know? And we all know that when somebody communicates something to us verbally, not on this podcast, because I'm sure everybody absorbs 100% of what we're talking about.
It's so compelling.
Scientifically, it has been proven that it's about 18%. So, so like they miss all this other stuff that they need to go back to. And it's not because they don't not listening. It's just they might be thinking about what you said and trying to adjust that, and then they miss the next point. So I think this is why the action was about getting people to think about, if it's written down, it doesn't have to be a formal document, but if it's Slack, or if it's like an email, or some type of a memo afterwards, that just lets people know what they're thinking and how things apply to them. It could clear up so many things.
Think too that you kind of were some of the things you were saying. I think also you're kind of anchoring on something around trust too. Like,
Yeah.
I think there's the act of writing things down shows trust in a multitude of levels. One,
Right.
trust from a leader to an employee, in the sense of like, it's almost feels more like a handoff then, to your point. I'm not keeping a lot of that close to my chest. I'm actually parceling it in a present to hand to you because I trust you to interpret and take that and come back back to me with questions. And I trust you, though, to hold the A on that because I'm kind of passing it over. And I think also from an employee to a leadership sense of trust, it's like, as an employee, it's like, well, as a leader, if you have not written down or outlined a single thing of what the hell we're trying to do I trust you? Like, do you know
Right.
what you're doing? Have you made up your mind? Do you have a plan? What's the plan? And I have
Yeah.
certainly seen that happen as far as like confidence erosion in organizations, where when a
Yeah.
leader doesn't clearly set the plan, over time, decisions are made, pivots will always need to happen, but when you're not carrying that narrative with your people of the why, that's where trust I have seen starts to really erode because it's like, why are we doing this? Like, why does it? And it might make perfect sense. Like, from a business perspective, it might make perfect sense,
Yeah.
but you have not brought people along on the journey. You haven't even really clearly outlined the journey. And now the journey is changing, and maybe it's changing a lot. And that's where people start to go, what are we doing here? And do I trust you to captain this ship anymore? Do I trust you with my career and what I'm doing? And that's where I see a lot of the time that breaks down. And then a lot of the time people decide to make their own decisions. That's when they start fracturing off and deciding to make their
Exactly.
own
And
choices for
reducing
themselves.
their engagement,
Yeah, exactly.
right? And because loyalty is the hook on that, feeling like you really can trust someone. If you can't trust them, then you're gonna obviously not be as loyal. And loyalty doesn't necessarily mean you a trait. It's not always about that. It's often about I don't feel as loyal or
Yeah.
invested in you anymore. Therefore, I might, scroll Instagram for an hour a day and not do my job. Or I had this great idea, but I might not share it with you because I just don't feel like it's gonna be valued or something like that. So I
Trust
think
is
it's a
so
big thing. It's a really big thing. And I think what you're talking about is at the crux of change management.
Mhm.
Like leaders are starting to really suck at change management, and it's probably 50% of their job
I
is
don't think they understand that it's part of their job. I don't think leaders are ever
that is a really big problem,
like,
isn't it?
maybe here's another business idea. The whole concept that as a leader, your whole job is pretty much change management.
Yeah, especially today.
But it's a vulnerable place because change management is really hard. And so you have to work really hard and you actually hold a lot of accountability to whether it works or not. So, what do leaders like to do? Hire a consultant because that's a good get
Yeah,
out free card. Or more junior people in the organization because put that hardest task and that most important accountability on someone who's not me.
that's
Because
right.
if I couldn't make a change happen, that is a red light as far as can I be a leader? That's what I find is like a lot of leaders are like, oh, you keep that away from me. That's somebody else's.
It's true. Like in big corporations, there's like
Needs
a whole change
accountability.
management team,
Yeah.
and like it's like
But it
takes
never
the
works that way because
accountability.
then the team
It's
comes
not.
in, they feel like
Yeah,
an outside source, everyone
yeah,
rejects them, they just posture, the change doesn't actually
yeah.
work. Like it's classic over and
You
over.
absolutely need the leader because
Yeah.
you need the leader to really be able to bridge and articulate so what for their particular team, for their particular business line, and nobody knows it like the leader does.
Yeah, exactly. And nobody trusts, like, ultimately, if the leader is the one initiating the change with their people and they're doing that job well, the people will follow them into that change and they will do that. So they're going to have the most impactful results if they do it. But it means that means you are putting a stamp on something and you're going to stand by it. And that means you're going to show some commitment and you're going to show some bravery and you're going to put your neck out there a little bit to do it.
Yeah,
And that makes people really uncomfortable.
I have to get over that. Another thing to solve. Okay, I really want to get to our next story because this one, we're going to talk about the quit GPT movement, which I think
Talk
was
about
funny.
trust.
Yeah, right? But it was so funny because, like, I think early in the week, like almost like Monday, we were talking about how this had happened and played out, and we'll go out there to say we use most models, but use Claude a lot for the coding and the co-work and stuff like that. But individually, many of us were using GPT, and we probably got caught up in this movement ourselves. So yeah,
The second I saw this, I was like, I'm getting into Claude because I feel like out of the team, I've been doing a lot more GPT than Claude versus the team. I feel like a lot of people have moved into Claude and really liking it. But
Mm,
sometimes I find, but now that I'm back into Claude, I'm actually liking because from this more strategic thought partnering, I was feeling like I was getting more out of GPT. But to be honest, I feel like the last while I've hit a wall with it and I'm kind of like, I'm not loving what you're giving me. And I'm feeling like Claude is actually being more effective from that perspective and from a copy perspective too. Like GPT's very wordy. Like if I have to put it between like GPT feels like Microsoft to me in the sense of like kind of old school and like it's like long language and like things like that. Whereas Claude is like very much more snappy and like I need more of that. And I find myself having to refine GPT a lot. And it's just like blah 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 blah. It's just like I'm already wordy GPT. I need someone to help me on the other end. I don't need you to add to it. If I'm correcting you, we have a problem here. Like we need to like tone this down.
Well, and the interesting thing is, like, when I pulled some data like today to kind of see what the impact has been, no, and again, ChatGPT is a private company, so you don't always know exactly what the outcomes were, but they're estimating that it could be between 1.5 and 2.5 million users chose to cancel their subscription.
Mhm.
At $20 a month, I don't have to tell you how much that is. And what they do know though is that the uninstall was almost a 300% increase
Yeah.
over previous weeks. So, that was really impactful. But on the flip side, GPT got the government contract, right? Like, so, you know, does that probably compensates for the loss of individual users to
If that is
get
the
such
case.
a massive contract? It's got to be the biggest contract and then you also are the preferred
Vendor.
model for the rest of the government, right?
Yeah.
So interesting.
I do think it's interesting. I mean, from my perspective, like, yeah, you did get that contract. I think I'm usually less of a short term gain and more of a long term player in general. Don't care about battles, care about winning the war. You know what I mean? In that way. And so for this, it's like, I think it's pretty nearsighted in my perspective. And I think the one thing is I feel really positive and I think people should feel very positive because I think we've had a lot of news and noise where AI feels like out of our control. It feels like something that's happening to us. We're being pushed into a new world that's like Jetsons, but not the fun way we wanted for Jetsons. Like, I don't have a single get ready machine, okay? That's the
No
only
get
thing I
ready
have
machine.
ever wanted is the get ready conveyor belt. That does not exist. Instead, all this other shit does. But it's like we're being pushed into this next evolution. I think people feel a loss of control and they feel like decisions are being made that don't make them feel comfortable. And I
Right.
think there is something really compelling and interesting from the understanding of like people have power. I think we just saw how the average individual consumer, like our consumer power is what drives everything. And so,
Yeah.
like, I think not seeing like how we can influence change in that way. And, that's great that they did get the government contract. It's a win for the business, but will they keep that government contract? I don't know. Like, we'll see. I think that's the thing with tying yourself with government is it's risky move because policies change, people change, and beliefs and whatever change. So, like, as soon as that administration is out, like, do you still stand? Like, it could be a short term win, it could be not. Like, it's hard to say. I mean, I think the US military is always going to be about all intelligence, no matter what government is in, but.
Oh, but that is what happened to Anthropic,
Yeah.
right? As I dug into really understanding, behind, a couple layers below the headlines and the Anthropic won't do this,
Mhm.
won't allow them to survey Americans. By the
Mhm.
way, it is against the law. So
Yeah.
nobody can survey Americans. But, and or allow them to, you be part of an autonomous weapon that is not manned by humans.
Mhm.
It went lower than that.
Yeah.
Like, so based on what the previous administration had their whole policy on AI, the actual way the contract was written, limited and potentially could have put people at risk,
Mhm.
in a military
Mhm.
capacity. Right or wrong, I don't know,
Yeah.
whether you have a view on that,
Yeah.
but it is interesting when you dug down, it's exactly what you just said, that Anthropic ends up losing the contract
Yeah.
based on the administration,
Yeah.
because the administration has a very different view on
Mhm.
war,
Yes. Very
clearly.
different view on war. Um, I also think too, like as a value-based company ourselves, I love that there is a sense of integrity over profit and immediate term gain. Like I know that's not necessarily the most capitalist view as far as like progression in that way to win the money at all costs. And not necessarily that's capitalism, but you know what I mean. But I think I love that we're seeing a balance from a really powerful organization, really standing for something important in a time where, things aren't as settled. Like, the market isn't settled. We aren't in a time where things are super flush and these kind of decisions to walk away from things. Might be easier at times than others, and I think that that's powerful. And as an individual, like I certainly that resonated with me as someone who
Mhm.
wants to make choices, like and I think what we're seeing is, I'm a woke millennial. I'm technically an elder millennial, but I'm pretty woo-woo and woke, and I get that. But I'm highly pragmatic, so I'm aware, it's like I'm aware of that. But I think for, people who align with that kind of thinking, and we certainly see that at League with our Gen Zs, younger millennials, values-based buying actually matters to these groups coming up. And so I don't think it's something to be discredited. And maybe though that group of individuals don't have enough buying power to displace, but soon enough they will.
Okay, well,
Soon enough they're going to be inheriting a bunch of wealth down.
yeah.
And so I think that is also a short term view in the sense of that, because these people have different views. I have a lot of hope for our Gen Zs and Gen As. I know people tend to be
Yeah.
negative about them, but I actually think they're a very wonderful subset of humans. And I'm really excited to see how they shape things as they get more buying power in the world, because I think they have a very different way of looking at things.
Well, I think that's, to your point, that generation will now have seen how when a community of voices speak or believe in something, their actions do have impact.
Mhm.
And so because I think that has been very blurred over the last few, maybe decade, about what is the power of just using your voice and your buying power,
Mhm.
right? No violence, no head-to-head battles, just demonstrating that based on your own beliefs,
Mhm.
you will choose to spend your money here or there.
Yeah.
And that is very powerful because although I don't know the anthropic numbers of how many new users they got, but we do know that their platform actually went out on the weekend because they just had so many unexpected downloads. And so they
Trying to do
weren't
some
ready.
work, Claude. It wasn't working so well. I was a
Yeah.
little annoyed, but also understood why.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Because remember you were saying that? You're like,
I
"I don't know,
know.
it's not working." I'm like, "I
Like,
wonder if
God,
it's
this thing just
because
keeps fucking
then
spinning and
it
I'm
just
trying to get something done.
it has been proven
Yeah.
the consumer demand took down the system because it just couldn't handle it, which, I do love that message. I love the fact and maybe there's more of that to come, where as consumers, as voters, we have the ability to use our voices and our
Mhm.
buying power to make sure that people understand our view on a particular topic.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think the other thing too is like, especially you think of Gen Zs or young millennials, they've had a hard ride. Like I can
Yeah.
appreciate like they did not have, and I'm always like, why are you guys so stressed out? You're so driven, you're so this, but they didn't have the privilege I had at a young age to like not really be too worried about it. Cause I knew I could step into jobs. There was abundant jobs, abundant salaries, abundant housing at affordable prices. Like I knew I could manage my life. And so then I knew I could just be an idiot if I wanted to be. And I was. And so, and so I think I think that's not something to underestimate either with these younger generations is we haven't necessarily set up a easy world for them to be walking into. And I think they got feelings about it. And I think
Yeah.
they're ready to make some decisions about it to make some comeuppances happen once they're able to. And so I think it's something we should be all be aware of.
That's actually, I'll give a shout out to to Gen Alphas.
Yeah.
Had the great privilege yesterday to just see how amazing this age group and generation is, as I got to speak at the Calgary Girls Charter School as an International Women's Day event. And these young ladies were impressive. The questions that they asked me, the way they tied my stories and my messages together was phenomenal. Really impressed. So I came back to the office and I'm like, if anybody's worried about the next generation, don't. They got this.
They got this. my daughter is 10, and man, the conversation, like, I'm just like, "How are you like this? Oh my goodness." People are like, "It's the parenting." It's like, I don't think so. I don't
Yeah.
think it is. I don't.
I think it has a lot to do with the way we parent today
Yeah, that's
versus
true.
how maybe we were parented. Nothing wrong. My mom and dad did a great
Yeah,
job. But, just the world has changed
yeah.
and as parents, we've had to navigate things that our parents didn't have to navigate. And these guys have access to knowledge that we wouldn't have had as easy of access to knowledge as they do. So and I think the curriculum has
Yeah.
changed.
Yeah.
I think they teach in different ways and different type of soft skills that maybe we weren't taught.
But highly effective, I would say.
I would say highly effective.
Mm.
Okay, let's go into this is my one of my favorite stories is about Klarna. So I remember in late 2024 when Klarna came out with this big announcement they were getting rid of 60% of their customer support teams. If anybody knows anything about my background, I've been an advocate in this area of customer centricity, customer contact centers, customer success for many years. And I was like, oh my God, they're going to cut 60% all at once. Well, and I get it. You want to remove friction. Obviously, when I'm in the middle of paying for something, friction is the very easiest way to lose me as a customer. So they really worked through the model and said, oh, well, remove all the friction and just use AI to do
Mhm.
it. Therefore, we don't need the humans. Oh, that didn't work. So this year's story is about how they brought those people back, but brought them back in a gig way. And there's controversy about whether that is good or bad. What are you thinking?
I mean, one, I think I know you and I kind of have smiles to this because we are purposely building a very human-centered tech company, and we both are quite passionate about this, and so I think there's, like, a bit of a smile there. I think there's, like, when I read this too, we're so black and white with our decision making and our narratives today, and I think, like, from that perspective, it just feels a little eye roll, and, like, when are companies gonna kinda get to a point of understanding, like, again, this change management perspective, like, you don't just, like, unplug and then plug in, and I think, like, everyone seems to be thinking that there is this, and it's just kind of
Yeah.
feels immature, if I'm gonna be honest. Like, it feels like a immature mindset, it feels like a junior mindset, it feels like a mindset where, like, you never actually had to be the one to make change happen. If you have such a limited
Yeah.
understanding of what it takes to implement any change. And I know we feel like we have the magic stamp on AI, and that it's some sort of a magical thing that just solves all of our problems, but like it doesn't. And I think we've shown, and a lot of research and testing that's been happening is showing like this is a ramping technology with a ton of opportunity and potential. But that does not mean out of the gate that it is just a turn on Homer Simpson button. Like we are not there yet. And so I think that's one thing where how do we get to a place where we stop, like, same thing in energy, and I feel a little passionate about this on the energy side because I came up in that sector for 20 years before moving into tech. It's just this same idea of like unplug of traditional resources and new plug into new. I'm from the energy industry. I absolutely want renewable, sustainable resources. To think you just turn off a tap and turn on a new when an entire infrastructure is built on that is ludicrous. And I think that's where you see a lot of frustration coming out of the energy system or energy sector because they understand that model and like understand what that means to ramp down and ramp up versus
Mm.
the average person doesn't. And so I think it comes back to some of the themes we're talking about. It's like, are we being driven by like just trying to like gamify market signals? We talked about that on our past.
This
Like,
is
is that
exactly
what
where
this
this
shit is?
was.
But then like at what cost? You know what I mean? Like there's so much, like, again, battle versus war. Like, what's the point? Did you get what you wanted out of it? Maybe temporarily. You got a little uptick of your stock and all of that. But now
For
people here,
sure.
you're going to have to go back. Like, I don't know that this really helped you in the long term get where you're wanting to go. And so I think, again, from this idea of like quick fix, gamifying market signals, not really understanding impact of decisions, like, can we not? Like, we're seeing this everywhere in every fucking headline, and I'm getting a little tired of it. I'm getting a little bit, a little too of my woke feminism is rising up a little bit too much because these do feel like a certain kind of decision that kind of aligns to a certain kind of energy. And so, like, that is something I have to keep in check sometimes. But it's like, how can we bring a little bit more thoughtfulness to some of these decisions that we're making and also understand that they impact real human beings.
Yeah, I think that originally when the announcement was made, and it was quite a splash that the CEO of Klarna made, and it was like kind of being first to market with a
Yeah.
massive AI play.
Yeah.
Now, I am going to give them credit for the fact that bringing them back as gig workers in the customer experience space is an exceptional model.
Mhm.
It really like, gives you it maximizes the ability to help the customer through surges. It absolutely maximizes and optimizes your bottom line spend. And as we have learned in our whole all the research and development we've done at League around careers, around income streams, what people are looking for flexibility between work and life is
Towards
the
that.
gig model works.
Yeah.
And so, there was some skepticism about like that, well, you just did this, brought them back. Now you don't have to full-time workers,
Mhm.
and that kind of stuff. But I don't think that's what he did. I think he actually then maybe did sit down and be more thoughtful
Mm.
and think about how humans and AI can work together to improve the customer experience
Mhm.
and make sure that at that moment of buying, think about in their world, that Klarna sits on so many websites,
Yeah.
right at that payment, interaction, and so if you're losing customers for somebody else, that is a tough yeah, right? Like, that is his main thing is that I have to make sure I'm not losing customers, so if the support
Mhm.
isn't there,
Yeah.
you're losing customers for sure. Like, I can change a buying decision quite quickly if it doesn't go smoothly.
Well, and you know what? I kind of love how you put that because I feel like you got me off my high horse a little bit of my rant in the sense of like maybe this is just the expanding and contracting of change. You know what I mean? And so, someone's, I guess, on one standpoint, do we feel like the early execution decision was made, in a way that supported people? Not great in that way, but did the intent to move forward in utilizing new technology and optimizing your business, even though it failed, it was a reasonable fail fast cycle to turn back around and then have a better solution. So maybe I should be a little less ranty about it because ultimately an end optimal, kind of place was reached at the end and a course correction was made. So I
Yeah.
think that's really fair.
And yeah, maybe that's a really good point because now that model is kind of out there saying, hey, a nice combination of AI where you need to make sure there's no friction and that, actions happen,
Hmm.
smoothly, but that you use a human safety net
Hmm.
when a customer really needs
Hmm.
quick response, talk through something, understand something,
Hmm.
de-escalate so that the buying still happens.
Yeah. And maybe, as Kalarna, as the ones who were going first, there should be applause in the sense of making a change without needing the market to signal you to do so. And so, like, I don't want to poo poo that in that sense because, yeah. And then you have to deal with chicks like me sitting there bashing you, saying you're immature and this and that, but you're weathered that. And now you've set up a use case. And so you've set up a use case that others can learn from and quickly implement this model in a way that hopefully helps others move forward. Now, could the use case have been different than a mass like
Right,
layoff? Like,
for
yes,
sure.
I think absolutely it could have been. But like again, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like we still got results out of this in a certain way. And I think it does set up a positive use case for other companies to understand how to implement this kind of change with a less drastic swing measure. And I like the temperature signals this gives to the market to say, hey, firing all your people might not work. That might not work. Like, maybe we gotta think about this a different way.
Yeah, and then also saying that, the gig model works in more places than just food delivery
Yeah,
and Uber,
exactly.
right? So I think, we've been testing that model for a couple of years now of where other places,
What are the
people
right
might
fit?
like fractional type of working in multiple places but doing it in a gig style.
Totally.
Yeah. Okay. So our third story, we're back to Gen Zs. I think they've been in our feed for a couple weeks now. Because again, there's lots of new stuff happening for them in the workplace. But one of the things that was interesting on this story this week was about they really are the most fluent in AI, right? And they also have the best questions around the legitimacy, the use of AI. But they're sitting at home building their own agents. They're learning how to code on it. They're doing all kinds of different things. But remember that bottom of the the hiring chart now is a little broken, and now we're not hiring them. So companies are not actually using the people with the actual natural skill
Mhm.
coming into their companies, with
Yeah.
the exception of IBM. We know IBM is still doubling down
Yeah.
on their number of Gen Zs that they've hired.
Mhm. Which I
Yeah.
think, like, I everyone is worried about pipeline and everyone's worried about talent pipeline, and so I do think, like, kind of reading into our Klarna example of just eliminating whole segments of workforce probably isn't gonna be a long-term viable solution. It's more of a short-term win potentially for certain reasons, whatever your business may be. And so I think that is something really interesting from the IBM perspective in the sense of understanding, like, well, we're aging out certain levels of the workforce.
Yeah.
It's the way the work works.
It's
It's
natural.
like,
That
it's literally the way it works. The older ones go and the younger ones
it's
come in.
not a bad word.
So, we can't eliminate entire swaths of people who will no longer be juniors one day, and then how are we
Right.
capturing that top talent and how are we aligning it to there? So I think the other interesting thing too is, like, we've certainly heard feedback from segments of businesses or groups who support that generation of individual is that there's also a bit of a negative viewpoint of AI in the marketplace too, from because of the negative impacts it's having on them. So I think there's an interesting dynamic there too of them being more proficient and more aligned, but also just like negatively viewing how it's impacting like their lives and what it means for them because it right now is being touted as inhibiting their ability to move ahead.
Yeah, and I think that's where some of the other things we've talked about in the past is, as somebody who's a Gen Z, they should be thinking about how they ensure that their AI skills actually provide them leverage in getting a job.
Mhm.
Right? And then you would remove some of those obstacles. And so because AI is still really self-taught, right? Like there's, people are teaching themselves how to use it, including us.
Mhm.
And so you definitely can go out and figure out how to learn and to use it on your own. It'll enable you in whatever you're doing today. But then being able to bring artifacts of what you've used it for and how that might help solve a problem in a particular company,
Mhm.
I think leaders are open to hearing that. And
Very much
that's
so.
actually how you get into these companies and start to reestablish that junior ladder rung when they come in looking differently. Because you sometimes have to teach, leaders new tricks and get them to move away from what they've been used to all their
100%. And I think there's something interesting too of like we're saying, oh, AI is replacing junior level skills, but I think there's an opportunity for Gen Z to flip that narrative too, where it's like, sure, it's replacing junior level skills, but I've got AI skills and AI has actually enabled me to get more subject matter expertise faster, quicker, better. So like I can maybe skip up a little bit and like I learned tons of things through AI
Mhm.
today that make me highly competent in areas like my 0 to 100, my 0 to 10, my 0 to 20, like that all moves so much faster now.
It does.
And so as a Gen Z, you could really wield that to your benefit in the sense of, but as long as you understand, and that's, I think, the biggest gap is how do you get access to understanding exactly what we're talking about, which normally has come through more of a coaching or a mentor type relationship. And if they're removing that in organizations, that's hard for you. So, what other avenues do you go through to get that understanding of how to position yourself, what your talents are, and bridge that into the narrative, the roles, the industries, the companies that you're wanting to go into so that you can align that? And I think that as a Gen Zer, if I'm you, that's the biggest gap I'm looking to fill. And we can help you with that, by the way. But,
We
you
can.
know, we can. I, yeah.
But I think, but again, and I think that that's a good point. The reason we've built League is because it's easy to say, but not easy to do.
Mm-mm. Yeah.
Right? And really a lot of your mentors, including your parents, may not be able to help you decipher how you get there, which one of the AI skills is best to know. How do you position yourself to solve a problem for a company when they didn't ask you to do that? Like all of these things are really new skills and this is why, you
Process.
know, Yeah, and the future of work has always said that we're going to need more curiosity, critical problem solving, the ability to be resilient and bring ideas up and know that, you might hear no 110 times before you hear a yes. But all those skills help you to actually carve your own path for it. And for sure, someone with not AI knowledge, like let's take this example. If somebody LinkedIn me right now and said they could build all of the AI agents that we needed inside League, I'd hire them tomorrow.
They giddy up.
Right? Because, like, we want that. We just don't have the capacity. We have the knowledge, but sometimes it's a capacity problem. And, if they could show the ROI on each one of those agents, it would be massive for a company.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I think the other thing too is if you're someone who's versed in working with tools or can get support and understanding what tools you need for the work that you need to do, like you're leveling, like you're becoming a superhuman in delivery. And so like your competitive advantage against older, people in the workforce becomes incredibly strong because you are not only going to be cheaper, you're going to be faster, you're going to be all of these things. And so there's a real opportunity there to make that your competitive advantage, make it part of your secret
Exactly.
sauce. And I think now that doesn't mean everyone else can't make that part of their competitive sauce, but Gen Zs, I think we're hearing, are at a position where they are out of the starting blocks faster than
For sure.
other groups might be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, well, then that leads really good into our big action for the week, which is really taking the time to write down your top 5 skills. And how many of those skills do you think should be AI related?
I think there should be a few of those in there. Should be at least two, or maybe two or
Yeah.
yeah.
Right? And so when we talk about that, we don't mean like you just say, I know how to use AI. We mean like the specific pieces of AI. Do you know how to build an agent? Do you know how to code with it? Like, can you develop a prototype? Those kind of things. There's a whole list of them. And AI can tell you what they are. But yeah, I think that, as we've done a lot of research on the skills that are going to be required in an AI ecosystem.
Hmm.
Obviously, the use of AI is one of those, but then you blend that with those really soft skills, those ones that are not really easy to teach, like that
Hmm.
critical problem thing, like the curiosity and that real ability to put processes and systems together. Those kind of things are just essential as we move through this into this next iteration of technology that we're working
100%.
through right
And like
now.
we've certainly talked a lot about, as AI is coming in, system thinking, that broader kind of like, so what, big picture. It's going to be very important because you're going to need to know how to tie these things together. And so write down your top skills and just look at them in isolation right now.
Yeah,
Look at your skills, just human skills, and then look at your AI skills. And then maybe next week we'll talk about like what
the
that means to
connection.
start to align
Yeah.
those things. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, another great addition.
All right. We're all moving together, everybody. We're moving into the future of work together.
Yeah. So thanks all of our listeners. Again, don't forget to share this podcast out if you found it enjoyable. We're really trying to grow our followers. So
Hmm.
please help us out with that. And we'll be back next week.
Yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.